Stan in Pennsylvania. Stan's been waiting for a bit. Hey, Stan, how's it going?
Stanley.
Hey. Hey, how you doing?
Doing all right, Stan. How are you doing?
Good. Well, after that last call, this is going to be really boring.
Oh, no, that's not true. Come on. I think your topic is interesting, but go ahead and explain what you want to talk about.
Okay, I think that guy's been playing too much Dungeons and Dragons. But anyway, I'll go on. I'm not going to say any more about that. The reason I'm calling today is, okay, I'm an atheist, so I don't have any problem with that part of it. But the thing that I'm calling about is, the thing that got me started on this was I listened to a lot of YouTube videos, and today I happened to be seeing a YouTube video with Neil deGrasse Tyson and Richard Dawkins titled The Poetry of Science. And this kind of got me thinking about this. Anyway, you know how a lot of theists or religionists or whatever you want to call them, they'll say, well, atheism is just another religion. And now we know that that's not true, because in the sense that religion is the worship of a deity, I mean, atheism is just the opposite of that. But I can understand what they're talking about, and I think I know what they mean by that. And I'd like to just give you my little opinion of why I think that way.
Yeah, okay, give your take, and then I'd love to hear Derek's take, and then my take.
Oh, I have a take.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, there's an old saying, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Okay. Now, the thing is, religionists or theists, they get their ideas and their authority from the Bible and from their religious leaders like priests, ministers, rabbis, etc. And we as atheists, even though there is no scientific authority per se,
well,
there are people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Lawrence Krauss, people like that whenever they say something, most people aren't going to say, oh, well, no, you're not right. But anyway, we're pretty much heavily dependent on, as atheists, we're pretty much dependent on scientists for the things that we think are true.
That's true for many atheists. Of course, you know, atheism is a broad term. I think it's important to make the distinction that there's a lot of people who, you know, if we checked off all the boxes of, you know, the lack of belief in God and everything, you know, we would call them an atheist, but they might not call themselves an atheist, and vice versa. There's some people who say that we aren't atheists for some reason. So, yeah, in a general sense, I would say for the folks here at the atheist community of Austin, we definitely rely on scientists who make published works. You know, we rely on that research to form a lot of our opinions and beliefs on things. I'd say that's totally fair. But, you know, that's not intrinsic to being an atheist, I'd say. And this is probably where your point is going with, Stan. It's like there's nothing, there's no book compelling me to make the decisions that I make as far as what kind of beliefs I hold. There's suggestions and there's opinions. Yeah. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm the one I recognize that I have at least the autonomy enough to make those decisions on what I believe, or if, you know, belief might not be a choice, but in the sense that I don't have a book, like I said, I don't have a tenet, I don't have a dogma that I'm following to consider myself an atheist. There's nothing that I have to follow to play that role. My atheist label is a strict label that I use for myself to describe, you know, a small portion of beliefs or lack thereof that I have, right?
Yeah, the same with me.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, a lot of these so-called flat earthers, they'll use parts of the Bible to justify saying that the earth is flat.
Yes.
You know, we all laugh at them. But anyway, and then people like Lawrence Krauss comes along and they say that the universe is flat. Nobody bats an eye at that. And you can verify that. You can go to YouTube and search Lawrence Krauss flat universe, and you'll see what I'm talking about there. But anyway, that video that I was talking about, where Neil deGrasse Tyson and Richard Dawkins were talking. Tyson and he are discussing. Dawkins is asking him some questions about where are the limits of the universe, and what would somebody who is sitting on what is supposed to be the limit of the universe, looking the other direction, what would they see? And Tyson haws around, and he says that, and I'm paraphrasing this. You can look this video up if you want. Again, it's The Poetry of Science. Okay, but Tyson says that at some point we just have to abandon our senses when it comes to mathematics and science, because there's some things about math and science that just aren't going to make sense to the average person.
Intuitively, yeah.
Right, intuitively. So the way I'm tying all this together is, if I abandon my senses, and then another thing I just want to mention is how Tyson wrote this book that says the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. That's one of his.
I like that quote.
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem with that, the way I see it, is that if I abandon my senses, there wouldn't be any reason for me not to think that gods exist, because that's exactly the same thing it tells you to do in the Bible when it talks about having faith.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely so there is this idea of, at some level, there's going to be things that scientific consensus comes to that we as lay people may not understand. And even some scientists may not understand, right? Like, there's lots of scientists right now that don't, I mean, most scientists that study the origins of the universe, for example, don't know exactly what.
But there's a big difference. I mean, because we have data, evidence, and hypotheses that speculate of this, and plus, again, we're talking about abandoning our senses, because we can't see a black hole. We can't see light bending. We can't see fabrics of universe dipping into pools. So we have to assume, based upon the math and whatnot. The difference between that and faith is that you're accepting this conclusion based upon no evidence whatsoever. If I don't understand it, it must be God. Whereas in science, it's like, well, I have these proposals based upon the data that we got. This is possibly what happened. I mean, we've never seen a complete rotation of Pluto, but we know based upon the math, based upon the evidence and a model that works with gravity, that we know that Pluto will be in this part of the sky at this time of the year based upon sound evidence and a model of science that works.
And just to clarify with this, because I think people do get confused, we are still using our senses to look at this evidence in the same way that's look, I can't see right now with my eyes that there's tiny organisms all over this table. But if I'm using a tool like a microscope, I'm still able to see that. And same thing with stuff that we're getting from space, these kinds of electromagnetic waves and stuff.
Right.
And, you made the example of, light bending and a black hole and stuff like that. We're still using tools to make those observations, which are still, in a sense, using senses. They're using their own kinds of measurements. It's just outside of the scope of human potential. We're putting it into languages and messages that humans understand.
Right.
Yeah.
But I did want to quickly go back to the original statement about saying how atheism is a religion and how we respond to that. I've always found this approach really interesting, because it's kind of like a theist is saying, well, you're just as blind as me, therefore you're just like me. And my response has always been, well, kind of playing the same game to them, saying, well, technically you're an atheist too when it comes to Krishna, when it comes to Buddha, when it comes to Confucius, when it comes to Muhammad. You're an atheist too. They don't like that.
Yeah, on some level, they don't have a belief in other people's gods, right? But here's the other thing, too. It's okay, let's say atheism is religion. So what?
So what?
If you're coming at me, you obviously believe a religion is true at some level, right? If you're asking these kinds of questions, then like that shouldn't bother you then.
Right.
The fact that atheism is,
And my atheism is such a small part of who I am and what I do. It's such a small, tiny part. Humanism is mostly where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And the activism that I do and the work that I do with the Atheist Vanguard. It's humanism. It's making this place better for us and, through humane means.
Yeah. The conflation of this idea of, oh, because I go to a community center every week where I make a show is just like, oh, it's just like going to church on Sundays. It's like, well, just because I'm a human being who organizes in community, that doesn't constitute a religion either, right? Like some people make that distinction as well. Or, even talking about atheism is like spreading the gospel. Like, well, no, it's like these are issues and topics that I'm interested in. You can have interest in topics without it being a religion, right? Otherwise, everything is religious.
Now, when you were still a Christian, was this a common phrase? It was like, I'm not religious. I have Jesus.
I have a relationship with Jesus.
I have
Absolutely.
a relationship
all
with
the
Jesus.
time. I heard that this week even. Yeah. So that's just playing with words. It's whatever. So
Okay, I'm just going to say one more little thing here.
of course, Stan. Of course.
All right. So way back years ago, the Islamic or Muslim community, Baghdad used to be pretty much the center of science. And then this one Muslim come along, I can't remember his name, and he was a cleric or something. Tyson talks about him sometimes, but said something about it's a sin or the Muslims should not play with numbers anymore. And that pretty much put an end to anybody from that part of the world participating in any kind of serious science. And I'm just wondering, this is just my own little uneducated speculation, I guess you'd say, but I wonder if he ran across something like that himself that he couldn't make sense of and just decided that he was going to tell everybody else that they shouldn't fool with it either because it's going to lead you in a direction that you really shouldn't go. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's my take on that. I'm going to go ahead and hang up and let you guys talk to people.
Well, Stan, thanks again for calling in.
Thank you.
And it's a good topic to bring up. I hope to hear from you again soon, and I hope you have a great rest of your night. Yeah, it's a common complaint. I hear it from people. And actually, I was talking to somebody, this was 2 weeks ago. I can't remember if I talked about this before. I don't think I did. Girl was asking me, she knew that I had a show here at the Atheist Community of Austin and stuff, and she was like, so like as an atheist, like is there like a book that you read? Like is there like, what do you do? And I there's a part of me that thought, oh, she's joking. No, she was actually genuinely curious because it's hard to imagine a community that talks so much about religion that doesn't do religious things, right? Like in the typical sense.
Well, and it's really funny how they try to correlate, atheism with religious dogma and religious establishment. A really common argument you'll hear is like, well, you have faith.
Right. Yeah, that's another one too.
Don't you have faith that the lights will turn on? Don't you have faith that the sun will come up and set? And I think it's just really a misunderstanding of those type of things.
My response to that is I have a belief for sure, and that belief can be supported or unsupported by evidence, by what we find around us.
Here's another one. You're atheist. You don't believe in nothing.
Oh, yeah. Classic stuff.
Where do your morals come from?
Where do your morals come from? It's just nowhere, I guess. I guess they just, exist in a vacuum. No, but seriously, I mean, like, these are all common things that we talk about, and we can talk about here all day. But there's other callers who want to talk about some other stuff, so I definitely want to give those guys a chance to talk here.